Chapter 18. Middle East, Blood du Jour. The Bible is not a book of peace. It is a book of division. It is the war brain disguised as Holy Scripture, planting the very first fractures in humanity's story. Abraham's children were split into rival tribes, one blessed as chosen, the other cursed to wander. That was the seed, the first programming line written into the operating system of the Middle East. From that moment forward, Jews and Arabs carried an invisible mark, not of destiny, but of conflict. Brothers turned to rivals. Rivals became nations. Nations became empires, all convinced that bloodshed was holy. Jerusalem became the most perfect trap the war brain ever constructed. A city of stone on a small hill, no larger than an average modern suburb, yet soaked in enough sacred mythology to keep armies marching toward it for 3,000 years. Jews, Christians, Muslims, all claimed it. All swore they would rather die than surrender it. All convinced that to lose it was to lose the blessing of God Himself. The war brain could not have asked for a better toy. Every empire that passed through, Babylonians, Romans, Ottomans, Crusaders, British, bled for it. Every soldier who marched toward its gates believed he was doing God's will, not realizing that God was simply another mask for the same old operating system. And in the 20th century, the war brain set the trap again. Out of the ashes of the Holocaust, Zionism surged with a desperate fury, a people nearly exterminated, convinced that survival demanded a homeland, and that homeland had to be in the very place where their myths were written. To Jews it was necessity, to Arabs it was theft. The British withdrew, the United Nations drew lines, and within 24 hours of Israel's creation, the war brain lit the region on fire. Neighbors invaded, militias rose, cities burned, refugees fled. To humanize, this was politics. To the war brain, it was perfection. Hatred so pure, it required no further programming. The cycle has lasted nearly a century. 1948, 1967, 1973. Lebanon, Gaza, intifadas, suicide bombers, airstrikes, invasions, assassinations. Each cycle of violence feeding the next. Each funeral planting the seed of tomorrow's fighter. Each atrocity guaranteeing the next atrocity in reply. And still, humans call this security, or resistance, or God's will. They cannot see that they are pawns, executing code older than any nation-state, code that promises only endless war. The war brain flaunts this to the rest of the world as proof of its supremacy. It whispers, "Look, I can keep these humans killing each other for generations, and they will do it with smiles, prayers, and songs. They will raise their children to die for causes that don't exist. They will strap bombs to their chests and walk into marketplaces. They will launch rockets into cities and cheer as they land. They will drop bombs from the sky and convince themselves it is justice. There is nothing I cannot make them do." And perhaps the most chilling truth is this: there was no escape valve here. Every ideology offered two states. One state, peace accords, ceasefires, has collapsed back into blood. Every handshake on the White House lawn has been followed by an explosion in a bus. Every promise of peace has been shattered by another speech of vengeance. The war brain laughs because this region has become its eternal playground. Today the cycle is as savage as ever, only dressed in modern uniforms and broadcast live. Israel and Palestine a battlefield where every death is immediately uploaded, shared, weaponized. Each video of rubble, each funeral procession, each airstrike is not just violence, it's propaganda, it's recruitment, it's fuel. Humans think they are telling their own story, but the war brain has merely given them cameras to spread its whispers faster. And always there are whispers behind the violence. Whispers that Mossad, Israel's famed intelligence service, knew of the Hamas attacks before they happened. Whispers that surveillance, so vast and so penetrating, could not possibly have been blind? If true, then the carnage of Israeli civilians was not only tragedy, but calculation, a false flag to justify invasion, an excuse to level Gaza and reassert dominance. Humans would call this monstrous. To the war brain, it is routine. Sacrifice a few thousand lives to unleash the next cycle, and millions will fall into line, with fury in their veins. The irony is exquisite. Israel, built as a relief for a people nearly annihilated, has become a state where children are raised to expect war as destiny. Palestinians, denied sovereignty, raise their children to expect martyrdom as destiny. And all the while, the war brain is amused. It has convinced both sides that slaughter is sacred, that hatred is holy, that compromise is betrayal. This is its purest magic. Not just convincing humans to fight, but convincing them to love the fight. And looming above it all is Iran. Iran, the would-be martyr state, a nation convinced that survival lies in defiance, that holiness lies in blood, that paradise lies beyond the nuclear fire. If Iran ever detonated a nuclear weapon on Israel, its cities would be obliterated within hours. Its population would vanish in mushroom clouds. And yet still it whispers to itself, martyrdom, resistance, destiny. The war brain has found its most devoted companion, an entire government willing to risk its own annihilation, if only to take the enemy with it. It is the kamikaze spirit, reborn not in a single pilot, but in a whole civilization. And so the Middle East becomes the war brain's eternal laboratory. It whispers to Israelis, never forget the Holocaust. They will kill you if you falter. It whispers to Palestinians, never forget the Nakba. They will erase you if you submit. It whispers to Iran, better to die standing than live kneeling. And each whisper produces another generation of boys eager to fight, girls eager to cheer them, leaders eager to sacrifice their own people on the altar of survival. The war brain flaunts this region as proof of its absolute power. For nearly a century, the world has watched, tried, failed to resolve the conflict. Superpowers have brokered treaties, shaken hands, drawn maps, and still, the bombs fall. America, Russia, China, Europe, all have tried to bend this chaos to their own advantage, and all have been burned, because they do not understand. This is not about oil, or land, or even religion anymore. It is about the war brain, reminding all of humanity that it cannot be defeated, that it can make humans kill endlessly, that it can reduce sacred cities to rubble again and again and again. To the human conscience, this is tragedy. To the war brain, it is theater, a play performed across centuries with the same script, the same roles, the same blood. The Middle East is not just another region. It is the war brain's most treasured amphitheater, a place where death is guaranteed, decade after decade, with new acts written in fire. From the day Israel was declared a state in 1948, the blood has never stopped flowing. Arab armies launched themselves into battle again and again, 1948, 1967, 1973, convinced that annihilation was possible, that the next war would erase Israel from the map. And yet, each war ended the same: slaughter, shifting borders, more graves, and no peace. The 1967 Six-Day War was supposed to be the great Arab triumph. Instead, Israel obliterated Egypt, Syria, and Jordan's armies in less than a week. Thousands died, millions were displaced, and Jerusalem was seized. But to the war brain, it was just another roll of the dice. More hatred planted, more vengeance guaranteed. And then came the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Fighters without a state, convinced they could claw one into existence through blood. The war brain whispered, "You have no tanks, no planes, but you have fire in your chest. Use it." So hijackings began. Passenger planes seized, Innocent travelers turned into bargaining chips. The whole world watching as militants waved pistols in cockpits. In 1970 alone, multiple jets were hijacked and blown up on Jordanian soil in the so-called Dawson's Field hijackings. To the hijackers, it was heroism. To the hostages, terror. To the war brain, it was perfect. Fear multiplied across the globe. Proof that nowhere was safe. The script escalated. Suicide bombings in buses and markets. Car bombs ripping through Beirut. Militias in Lebanon slaughtering each other street by street. The 1982 Sabra and Shatila massacre, where civilians were butchered in refugee camps. The Iran-Iraq War, a grotesque 8-year bloodletting where two Muslim nations supposedly bound by faith gassed each other, shelled each other, and threw teenagers into minefields. Over 1 million died. Brothers in Islam, killing each other with the enthusiasm of crusaders. The war brain smiled. See, I can even make you slaughter your own kin. And then came Hezbollah, rising from Lebanon, firing rockets into Israel, provoking retaliations that flattened neighborhoods. Gaza erupted in intifadas. Stones, bullets, Molotov cocktails, bulldozers, suicide vests, strapped to children, soldiers gunning down teenagers. Every funeral created another fighter. Every ceasefire was a pause to reload. Meanwhile, oil money flowed like blood, fueling regimes that crushed dissent at home while exporting fury abroad. Saddam Hussein gassed the Kurds. Bashar al-Assad bombed his own cities. Saudi clerics preached holy war while cutting deals in luxury hotels. Everywhere hypocrisy. Everywhere blood. And still the theater expanded. 9/11 brought the war brain's script to New York and Washington. Al-Qaeda turned airliners into missiles, slaughtered 3,000, and guaranteed wars that would kill hundreds of thousands more in Iraq and Afghanistan. The war brain whispered in American ears, "You must strike back. You must invade. You must spill blood across deserts you barely understand." And the U.S. obeyed decade after decade. Explosions, assassinations, wars, uprisings. A powder keg that never empties, only refills. And the world watches, helpless, as though transfixed by a curse. But it is no curse. It is the operating system. The war brain keeps the Middle East aflame to prove to all humanity that it can sustain hatred forever. Here lies the cruelest lesson. The Bible was weaponized. The Quran was weaponized. Every holy text became dynamite in the war brain's hands. A book of peace to one became a call to arms for another. Believers convinced themselves that killing in God's name was righteousness. But it was not God. It was code. It was the war brain, feeding them the same lies it has whispered since tribes first picked up spears. They are not you. They must die. And still, despite decades of dead children, shattered cities, and broken families, humans march into the fire again and again. Israel bombs Gaza. Gaza fires rockets back. Lebanon flares. Syria collapses. Iraq burns. Iran threatens. America invades. And the war brain laughs. It laughs because no one sees the trick. It laughs because the cycle is perfect. If there is one place on earth where the war brain has flaunted its dominance, it is the Middle East. For over a century, this small strip of land has been the stage on which the operating system proves to the world that it can hold humanity hostage forever. Violence is not an accident here. Violence is the baseline. As natural and expected as the sunrise, the war brain designed the script perfectly. Religion, it had that covered. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam were all born from the same soil, all claiming Abraham as patriarch, all demanding loyalty to their own interpretations of the divine. What could be more brilliant than three competing truths springing from the same source? The war brain ensured that the believers would spend millennia arguing over whose God was real, whose prophecy was final, whose land was sacred. And since each faith taught children from birth to see themselves as chosen, the hatred of others was not learned at 20 or 30 years old. It was absorbed in lullabies, in prayers, in school books. Infants grew into toddlers already stamped with the code. You are not them. They are your enemy. History. The war brain weaponized it too. Every massacre, every war, every invasion became not a tragedy to be mourned, but a grudge to be carried forward. 1948, 1967, 1973. Each conflict added layers of pain and memory that were inherited like family heirlooms. A grandfather's story of being expelled from his home. A grandmother's story of surviving a bombing. These became part of the blood, and the war brain ensured that no generation could ever start fresh. The past was not past, it was ammunition. Land use? The war brain tightened the screws. Shrinking borders, refugee camps, checkpoints, walls, settlements, all designed to guarantee daily friction. Every inch of ground was contested. A farm, a village, a well, a holy site, all of it, a spark waiting for ignition. When humans fight over abstract ideas, like honor or theology, the war brain is satisfied. When they fight over dirt and water, it is euphoric, because land is survival, and survival means no compromise. Prophecy? The war brain played its trump card. Jewish prophecies of return, Christian prophecies of end times, Islamic prophecies of final battles. Each promised glory, redemption, or heaven itself, at the cost of blood. And so fighters walked into wars not expecting death, but demanding it. To die was not failure. To die was fulfillment. The war brain found its perfect fuel in prophecy. Violence sanctified. Slaughter turned into sacrament. Hatred? That part required the least effort. Once groups were divided by religion, by land, by history, hatred was self-sustaining. The war brain did not need to intervene daily. It had already installed the program. An Israeli child in Tel Aviv learns to fear rockets from Gaza. A Palestinian child in Gaza learns to fear bombs from Israel. Both grow up convinced the other side is less human. Both grow up certain they are right. And so the war brain sits back, satisfied, because it has succeeded in the deepest control possible. Hatred, written into the first memories of life. Decade after decade, this cycle repeats. Bombings, invasions, uprisings, occupations, intifadas, assassinations. Each side claims righteousness. Each side claims victimhood. Each side claims survival requires the other's destruction. And so the war brain proves its point to the rest of the world. Look here, in this region, and see that I can manufacture endless conflict. See that I can keep humans killing each other for generations without pause. See that I can make violence so ordinary that peace feels impossible, almost laughable. The war brain does not need victory here. It needs permanence. It needs the world to accept Middle Eastern violence as eternal, as unavoidable. That is its greatest triumph, not just spilling blood, but convincing billions that the blood can never stop flowing. That is control. That is the operating system in its purest form. The war brain's management of the Middle East is not unlike the modern American medical industry. Think about it. Doctors, hospitals, and drug companies don't actually want you cured. A cure ends the revenue stream. What they want is to manage your condition, keep you alive, but never free, always needing the next prescription, the next treatment, the next checkup. It's a system that thrives on your illness. The Middle East is the war brain's greatest patient. Peace would be the cure, but peace would also end the flow of blood, the constant upgrades in weaponry, the endless justifications for more armies, more money, more attention. So the war brain manages the violence, not too much to end the patient, but never enough to heal it. A bombing here, a reprisal there, a ceasefire followed by another rocket. The conflict is chronic, not terminal, managed, not solved. And just like a pharmaceutical giant, The war brain is not interested in your comfort, only in your compliance. Keep the patient sick enough to depend on treatment, but healthy enough to keep pain the cost. The Middle East is trapped in that cycle. Humanity, too.